What is going on, everybody? It's your boy Will, and I am back to do my last review of the year. I'll admit the second half of this year has been kind of slow for me, and I do apologize. It is Christmas morning. If for those of you who celebrate Christmas, Happy Christmas or Merry Christmas. And if you don't, you celebrate Hanukkah or Kwanzaa or whatever holiday you celebrate. Happy holidays to you and yours. So I'm saving the best for last this year. This is going to be my non-spoiler review for Star Wars Episode 9, The Rise of Skywalker. Here we go. Okay, so before we get started, I need to preface this review as such. As you can see, it's over here actually, but as you can see, I am a huge Star Wars fan, and I've been a Star Wars fan all my life. And this was the culmination of the Skywalker saga that began all the way back in 1977. I think I got that right. So this is a 40-year journey that we have gotten to this point. We've had our ups, we've had our downs. And I will say, overall, I thought the finale was good. I thought it was decent. It is not my favorite of this new trilogy. I will say that outright. It is not my favorite. It is not a bad movie by any stretch of the imagination, but I wouldn't say it's their best foot of this new trilogy. So, The Rise of Skywalker takes place about a year after the events of The Last Jedi. But based off of this movie, you really wouldn't know that because they kind of feel like they ignored a lot of what happened in The Last Jedi, which I feel is kind of a detriment to this movie. It is no surprise in this movie, and it's not a spoiler, Emperor Palpatine is back. He is back from the dead. And the whole story kind of revolves around that, and I don't know if that's a good thing or a bad thing. So they brought back J.J. Abrams to direct Rise of Skywalker. I forget who was originally supposed to be, but the directors have changed multiple times. The Last Jedi was the previous installment of the franchise, and that was directed by Rian Johnson. And Episode 7, The Force Awakens, was directed by J.J. Abrams. So J.J. Abrams did not direct Episode 8, but came back to do the finale. And it kind of shows. One of the things I will say about this whole sequel trilogy is that it really never really felt like there was a singular idea of what the end goal of this trilogy was supposed to be. Which you can tell by watching, if you watch these movies in order, like typically most trilogies you would watch in order. It feels like the ideas are combating each other. A lot of the ideas that were placed in The Last Jedi, you can kind of feel the director was like, you know what, that was good, but I want to do this. Kind of how some people felt that Rian Johnson said that with The Force Awakens, was like, hey, that was good, but I want to do this. That many turns back and forth, it really throws off your watching of all three together. Now, as it stands on its own, when I just watched The Rise of Skywalker, it is enjoyable. There are a lot of moments and sequences in this movie that I really, really enjoyed and really, really loved. I will admit, though, for certain things, and I don't know if this is just a commentary on J.J. Abrams and his directing style or his storytelling style or just on this movie on its own, I felt like there was a lot of situations where you just had to, they were literally just looking at the audience and saying, just go with it. Most movies will have those moments where it's just like you have to suspend your disbelief to just kind of enjoy what you're watching. So in terms of the characters were all fine. I enjoyed Rey's character arc in this one. It wasn't much different from what we've seen of the previous movies. So Rey's character arc was pretty good. Kylo Ren's, I don't know how I feel about his conclusion, but once you got to the end, it made the most sense out of what you were given. So this movie really feels like it makes the most sense by the end of the movie with what you were given. And I've waited like a day to really talk about this. With a lot of the directions that this entire trilogy has gone through, I went into this very tempered. I wasn't getting my hopes up for a lot of it. I just wanted something that was a satisfying conclusion to all of the story arcs that they opened up in this trilogy, as well as some lingering ones from past trilogies. And I will say that it does deliver a nice conclusion. I think with what they set up, it's the best possible outcome. And also with what they had to work with. You have to understand that you had to deal with the passing of Carrie Fisher. So they did use Leia in the movie. This is not a spoiler, but it was all used footage from The Force Awakens that she shot well before she had passed. So some of her scenes were kind of janky, but it's to be expected with what they had to work with. And I like fan service, and there was a lot of fan service in this movie, and there's nothing wrong with fan service. There was moments in this movie where fan service, I was like, oh my God, it was so great. But then there were other moments where it's just like, did that have to be in there? It was just, there were moments like that for me where I'm literally sitting in the theater and one moment, oh my God, that's cool. And then there are like other moments where I'm just, huh? What? So I'm of multiple minds about this movie. On the one hand, I enjoyed it. There was a ton of sequences I really liked. The opening action sequence I thought was fantastic with the Falcon. I'll jump into that with spoilers if I do a spoiler discussion. But the opening sequence of that was fantastic. I thought the character dynamics between the core three, Rey, Finn, and Poe, were actually really good. They're all likable characters. They're all characters you really kind of invest in. And also, being that this was the first real time those three have actually interacted with each other for an extended period of time in the entire trilogy, just let that sink in. It was really refreshing and nice to see. On the other hand, there was a lot of things that were set up in The Last Jedi that you would hope were carried over in this one, but I know they say they didn't retcon it, but they kind of did retcon a few major things. Namely, like Rey's parentage, where she comes from. And I kind of knew it was one of two things. And if you know what I'm talking about, you kind of know. And I was just not a fan of that decision. I understand what they were going for, but I think you could have still gotten there without reverting back to the tropes that have been going on for the last few decades. I thought you could have done a lot of different things. And I felt like there were certain things, it felt like they were playing it safe. Considering the backlash from the previous movie and the underperforming of the Solo movie, I understand why they felt like they had to play it safe, especially when it comes to Star Wars, which is kind of weird considering the fact that The Mandalorian is right now on Disney Plus, and that is fantastic. And that has nothing to do with any real existing characters. We get all new characters who are tied in very simple ways without overcomplicating it, if that kind of makes sense. Again, I'm of multiple minds of this, and I think I will do a spoiler discussion just because I want to talk about a couple of the points that I really liked and a couple of things that I really didn't. I did cry at a particular scene in this movie, and I will say what that scene is in my spoiler discussion. So this movie has an emotional effect on me and on a lot of people from what I've been reading online. But there are certain things that kind of make it, as a whole trilogy, kind of not work almost. It's like you've got three individual movies with no one really riding the ship. It shows, and it's not even that this movie really contradicts The Last Jedi. There's certain things that it contradicts from The Force Awakens, which was directed by J.J. Abrams. So it's like, it just, there's certain things in it where you just have to kind of like, okay. And it's just like, oh, there's my favorite character from 20 years ago, or oh my god, there's that ship, and oh, this is a huge action set piece that's amazing to watch. They're trying to get to this end point, but all the points in between are just kind of like janky, and it's just telling you to be like, hey, ignore most of these points. We're going to hit the big beats, and we're going to get you to the end. And by the time that the movie was over, I kind of felt like, I'm like, so are we good? Are we good? Like, is everyone okay with this? And I think that's how I felt the movie was asking me. Like, are you okay with this? We know the last one you weren't super okay with, even though I kind of was. And that's something also for a different discussion too. But like, I rewatched the last two movies the day before going to see it, and I forgot how much, and it really kind of hit me when I finished The Last Jedi. I was like, The Last Jedi has the most scenes in it that I really love from this new trilogy. And it kind of puts The Last Jedi as my favorite movie of this trilogy. Not saying that this is a bad movie. This is not a bad movie. It is it's a lot of movie. And it's a lot of catch up for, I think, where JJ wanted to take it, but because he didn't direct the second movie, he felt like he had to fill in the gaps in this movie. And I don't know if that made it super enjoyable for me. Again, there's a good number of scenes in this movie that I absolutely loved. I had a blast with. There's one that made me cry. Surprisingly, not the one that you would think, but it's one that made me cry. It's just, it could have been better to me. I think if there was a singular voice that really had all three movies in mind, and you could have still had different directors, but you would have had one idea of like, hey, this is what we're starting with, this is where we want to end, and this is what the middle should be. If you had that sort of arc where it was much more clearer and not as much internal combating between two movies, like, you really can't, in my mind, it's really kind of hard to watch The Last Jedi and then watch Rise of Skywalker, like, immediately afterwards. Like, you could go from Empire to Return, you can go from Attack of the Clones to Revenge of the Sith, but when it comes to these two, they feel like such contradictories to each other. I know I'm using the word wrong, but they feel so contradictory to each other that it's like watching two different movies, like almost like an anthology, like kind of an anthology movie. And it does require a little bit of leaps of logic, but if you can separate that and you came out of this absolutely loving it, I'm glad. I'm so happy that it resonates deeply with more people. It resonated with me on certain levels, but as a whole, I don't think it hit me as hard as I feel like it should have. I think at the end, I was very confused because I didn't hate it, I didn't dislike it, but I also didn't love it. And it left me in this weird middle ground where it's like, I really love this scene, I really love that scene, and I thought the last fight was really great and epic, but then there was this section in the fight that kind of made no sense, and like, how did this happen to that? And when I start over analyzing it, then it stops being fun. and that's kind of where I'm at with the entire saga films at this point. And it's okay. It's okay. And I think in closing of this non-spoiler review, I think The Rise of Skywalker is a really good example of having a thorough idea go all the way through if you're telling a multiple movie story. Sometimes you can pick it up and make changes where you need to make changes. I mean, case in point, remember the original Star Wars movie, they never had an idea for sequels until it blew up. Once it blew up, then they came up with Empire and Return, and but they did those together. And for all the flack the prequels do get, and again, I'm not an apologist for the prequels at all. I liked them when they first came out. Over time, and then they're not terrible. They're not great, but they're not terrible. But those have one singular voice taking you all the way through. Whereas this one, I think they wanted to go with different directors, which is a great idea, but when you clearly have two different directors going for two different style of movies, it would have made more sense if JJ really kind of picked the ball up from Last Jedi and carried most of it through and then just added on what he wanted to add on. But it felt like there were certain moments where I'm like, that feels like a retcon. Most people spin it as like, well, from a certain point of view. Really? Okay. That's cool. But overall, like I said, it was not my favorite. I'll be completely blunt and honest with that. It's not my favorite, but it's not a bad movie. And that's okay. That's my non-spoiler review of The Rise of Skywalker. I really tried to keep it non-spoiler because I do feel you should go see this in theaters. If you are a Star Wars fan, if you've been a fan of all of the movies, or just the franchise as a whole, I think it's worth seeing it in theater. It's really lovely to watch. The action is incredible. It's probably some of the best lightsaber fighting I've seen in most of the movies. There were a lot of homages and callbacks. Some worked, some didn't. Some felt like they were just kind of shoving it in your face. But there is something in this for everyone, so I do stress that people go see The Rise of Skywalker. If anything, just to be a part of the conversation too. So, for those of you who have seen Rise of Skywalker, what did you think about it? Did it blow you away like a lot of people I know it did? Or did you have some issues with it like I did? Comment down below, let me know. This is non-spoiler, so keep the comments non-spoiler if you will. I will do a quick spoiler discussion. I'm going to try not to ramble on for too long. But I will do a spoiler discussion for The Rise of Skywalker, just to point out a couple of the things I really liked and a couple of things that just kind of irked me a little bit. So, hope you'll check that out. Hope you have a happy holidays and a happy new year. And here's the 2019. Get ready for 2020. Till next time, catch you later. Hey, thanks so much for watching this video, and you made it all the way to the end. Aren't you special? If you did like this video, if you don't mind, give me a thumbs up on the description. As well, if you click on my face right over here, you can actually subscribe to the channel for more videos. And if you've got a few minutes, why don't you check out a video or two that are floating on the side right here. Later.